The British have made a breakthrough in aviation. They are referred to as the king of aeroplanes, and everything is thanks to them. Imagine an aeroplane called Vickers VC10 with engines in different places. Normally the engines are on the wings, but in this aeroplane, the engines are at the very back. From a distance, it looked like it was moving faster than anything else parked on the ramp. It's like an F1 car, sleek and long thanks to its slender structure, and the engines are at the very back on the tail like a stick. But this aeroplane was not designed to win races, but to dominate the skies over Africa and the Middle East, where few have ever succeeded. The VC-10 was Britain's solution to a special problem. Boeing's 707 and Douglas's DC-8 were difficult to operate in hot areas and could only fly short flights, but needed an aeroplane capable of long flights. It was designed not only for speed, but also for robust performance. BOAC, Britain's flag carrier at the time, needed to fly in comfort and luxury without harming others, and the starting whistle blew to do just that. The difference between the other aeroplanes was not a power, but a lot of factors. Flying the VC-10 was an adventure. Passengers could fly in silence because an engineer had thought of this and put the engines at the rear. The service was impeccable, the journey was smooth, and the prestige was unquestionable. For many people, this was the Concorde experience before Concorde. VC-10 was Britain's response to a unique challenge. It had to do something that Boeing's 707 and Douglas's DC-8 struggled to do: fly very comfortably in short and hot weather and make long flights. It was built with endurance and speed in mind. BOAC, Britain's flag carrier at the time, needed an aircraft that could reliably, economically, and elegantly carry passengers to the far corners of the empire, and performance was paramount. But there were other important considerations. Flying the VC-10 was an adventure. One thing that surprised everyone is the silence because the engines are at the very back of the aircraft. The journey was smooth, the service excellent, and the prestige undeniable. For many, this was the Concorde experience before Concorde. However, these advantages also served as a disadvantage, as they were important for a small number of airlines operating in a small number of locations. Some companies were at first wary of this aircraft, but later gave their approval for it. Although the management wanted more Boeing, the company was firmly in favor of the British product. BOAC eventually ordered 14 of the larger, longer-range Super VC-10 variant and 12 of the standard VC-10s. Ghana Airways, Middle East Airlines, and several charter companies were the other operators taking risks. Of the hundreds of 707s flying around the world, the production of 54 aircraft went up to the dusty shelves, which was very little in this weather. The VC-10 is an aeroplane that is about more than transporting people or the amount of money per seat. It represented a certain idea of what air travel could be like. More than money, this company was concerned with the performance of the aircraft. Stepping into a 1960s VC-10 is like stepping into a flying bedroom. A wide rear fuselage, rear-mounted Rolls-Royce Conway engines that make you feel like you're in a dream, and a very quiet and calm atmosphere that makes even the longest flights feel effortlessly elegant. The pilots loved it. The VC-10 was responsive, powerful, and agile. It was a passenger aircraft, but it could fly like a fighter. Thanks to its powerful thrust and high-mounted wings, it had steep climbs and short takeoffs. As controllers at hot, high, and humid airports in Africa and the Middle East soon discovered, the VC-10 did not need a runway to land against its competitors. Its capacity to continue operating at altitude made it a lifeline for places others could not reach. But what about the travelers? It was quiet, and that's what they remembered. Cabin noise was low because the engines were set so far back in the fuselage that it felt like a step into the future. Now everyone would talk in whispers because it was so quiet in this aircraft. It was possible to eat in relative peace. Gentle landings and a smooth ride were praised by business travelers. The VC-10 was a unique, almost aristocratic model in a world of increasing standardization. Despite its glamour, the VC-10 was very risky in windy weather. There was no possibility of saving fuel, and maintenance was very long and costly. Although it was a source of pride, it had the disadvantage that the British had built it. Parts were hard to find and also expensive. Also, very few people wanted to work for this company. In the 1970s, as airlines liberalized and profit pressures increased, cheaper, more widely used designs began to overtake the VC-10. Nevertheless, it survived, especially in the Middle East and Africa, where harsh environments made its functionality crucial. With the same poise that has always characterized it, the VC-10 climbed, cruised, and landed where other jets faltered. It was called the Flying King of Africa because it was often seen at airports such as Lusaka, Entebbe, and Kano, and because it flew a lot in Africa. Still sophisticated, still in control, still proud. However, even the most elegant designs became obsolete over time and lost their former power. By the late 1970s, the airline industry was dominated by statistics rather than romance. The economic demands of public transport were met by aircraft such as the Boeing 707 Douglas DC-8 and later the 747. Every seat counted, just like every kilogram of fuel. And the VC-10? The aeroplane was still magnificent. Design was becoming irrelevant. British Airways had to cut costs to preserve its heritage. It also officially ceased commercial VC-10 operations in 1981. They did not completely abolish the era, but a few retired to dusty garages. The transport and refueling capabilities of the VC-10 were discovered by the Royal Air Force, RAF. VC-10K passenger transports were even issued to troops. From time to time, these special aircraft met the fuel needs of combat aircraft in the air. During the decades of its service in the RAF, the VC-10 always did its job very well, carrying passengers very well. Finally, the last VC-10 entered the dusty garage exactly 12 years ago in 2013. However, it never made a loud noise. Nobody noticed it, just like its engines. As it came to a slow stop at the end of the runway, its engines were silenced. But it left behind more than an airplane. It left behind the essence of an era. Perhaps the story of the VC-10 reminds us that we need to reconsider what success means. Is it the most sold aircraft, or the aircraft they remember and love the most? So, do you think the legacy of the VC-10 still resonates in the skies today? Of course it does, because some aircraft are more than technical marvels. They are also symbols of national pride, cultural icons, and aesthetic rebellions. The VC-10 was such a machine. For the British, aviation is very important, and they did it very well. The VC-10 was a bridge between the de Havilland Comet and Concorde in the British design tradition that began with the Comet and ended with Concorde. It signaled the bold engineering of the Concorde while retaining the classic elegance of the Comet's lines. However, there is a deeper irony in this story. The VC-10 was constantly both ahead of the curve and behind the curve. Perhaps this aircraft had the opportunity to fly a little longer, but it gave up too soon and was retired. We may sympathize with it because it was retired early. Today, when you see a VC-10 parked at Heathrow or at an old airbase in Africa, you are looking at more than an obsolete aircraft. You are looking at the skies of the past, a sky that reflects a time when elegance triumphed over efficiency and design over technology. The legacy of this aircraft lives on and will continue into the future. What do you think? Could the VC-10 make a real comeback if it were redesigned today, to combine the elegant essence of the past with the demands of today? Or do some legends only live once? In the decades following the VC-10, efficiency, affordability, and standardization dominated the aviation industry. Airbus A320s, Boeing 737s, etc. Many people flew different aircraft, and now all aircraft are the same. Nowadays, when you close your eyes at an airport and listen to the engine sound, it is difficult to identify which aircraft it is. But VC-10, there were Rolls-Royce engines, and you could hear the engines even from a different continent. This engine was a real earworm. This aircraft left its mark wherever it flew. Its smooth landing on dusty runways made it a favorite of pilots when British Airways operated it in Africa. The cabin was quiet because the engines were mounted in the rear fuselage. Quiet? Indeed it was. No engineer could do what the VC-10 did because these engines were specially engineered into the rear fuselage. In addition to its performance, the aircraft was also remarkable for its elegance. In addition to being aerodynamic, its design was poetic. For passengers at the time, boarding the VC-10 was more like stepping onto a stage than simply getting on an aeroplane. The only bad thing is that this aircraft went to the dusty shelves early. In an increasingly globalized aviation industry, cost and fleet compatibility have taken precedence over aesthetics. The VC-10's fuel consumption was more important than its aesthetic appeal, and this case was lost. However, it is also possible that the VC-10 was the wrong aircraft for its era. It was too avant-garde, too noisy, and too fashionable. Maybe it is a legend like the VC-10, and it had a structure unlike any other aircraft, so there is even a possibility that it will return. What do you think? If today an airline tried to create a new generation VC-10, not only for sentimental reasons, but also to bring elegance and engineering back to the skies, would you buy that ticket?